Hi, Gargi ma'am. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us today here. On behalf of the Rai Foundation, we are extremely glad to have you here.
I feel very fortunate to be asked to be spoken with. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And let me just brief you a little bit about the foundation. So basically, the Rai Foundation is a community-based organization, which is working on rehabilitation for every sector of the society. So basically, the Rai Foundation has its tentacles spread in all the sectors, starting from special children, counseling their parents, helping transgenders, or maybe, even if it's sex workers, right? So the Rai Foundation is helping everybody out. And as a part of the initiatives that the Rai Foundation has taken up, we are running a health fest, which is aimed at spreading awareness about various physical and mental illnesses which are related with those conditions, right?
Mhm.
So we, as interns, we are studying cases and we are
Mhm.
spreading awareness, looking at the cases from a new perspective, right? So today, the case in hand that we have is one of an armed forces personnel, right?
Mhm.
So I had a word with one officer from the armed forces, wherein
Mhm.
uh, they told me that there is so much stress that they have to go through on a daily basis, right? So stress being the epidemic in the armed forces is what we are going to be focusing on today with you, Gargi ma'am. And before I go ahead, we have Ms. Gargi Vishnoi today with us, uh, who is a counseling psychologist. She has worked with Fortis Escorts Jaipur. She has worked with Rajasthan State Legal Services Authority, and she has also worked with Indian Army. So there's nobody better than you to have this discussion with Gargi ma'am. So how do
Thank
you
you.
feel
Thank you
about
for
it?
the introduction. I am very happy to be speaking to you today, quite honestly, because, like I said, this is something that I'm really passionate about. Mental health has to be, which is made commonplace, and everyone should be talking about it. And all the jobs have something or the other which can lead to stress. But I believe personally that defense forces as a whole have more stressors, and they could have a longer, you know, sort of effect on individuals. So I'm really glad that you picked up this topic.
Thank you so much. So before jumping into the uh, bits of defense forces and how stressful the life there is, so I would just want you to talk about generally about the mental health implications if you face stress every single day, not just at work but anywhere,
All right.
if you have to
So
go through
stress
stress.
is
Yeah.
right. So stress basically is your body's response to any negative stimulus. And generally, over the generations, or in the whole cycle of evolution, the stress usually in the early men used to be about, finding food, not getting attacked by other tribes or by an animal. And that would be life-threatening. And we haven't come so far in the cycle of evolution that our body is able to distinguish that which stress is too much and life threatening and which what is a little stress, like probably there's no electricity today, so how am I going to get AC working. So what happens is that our body still responds how it used to respond all those years ago, and that is what stress basically does, is it creates this system of fight, flight, and freeze responses, wherein adrenaline and cortisol, these are two hormones which are released in your body. And what this does is it will obviously help you fight these external situations, these external problems. And your body gets into this mode wherein it's constantly firefighting, right? So if this is the normal where you should be existing, stress takes you here and you're existing here, which is not good for your body if it's extended for a longer period of time. You have to come to a resting phase. But recently, there's so much stress in the environment. It could be because of anything. So we constantly remain in the mindset of stress. Our body remains in a stressed out state, which can lead to exhaustion and burnout, which is happening with a lot of people. So basically, this is what stress is, and it can have a lot of physical implications, like fatigue, um, dizziness, IBS. It could mess up with your hormonal balances. It can really mess up with aches and pains in your body. Sometimes people experience these non-biological pains in their bodies, which are completely stress related. It could really impact your relationships with people. It impacts your output at work. Impacts how you sleep at night. It impacts how happy you are. So overall well-being, really. Stress is sort of a monster which rears its ugly head time and again in today's society.
Thank you so much. I think we can all relate with that particular answer, right? So whenever we are stressed, we go through certain periods. Okay, we are irritable, we are frustrated. We get angry at the people
Angry.
we do not intend to be angry at, right? And one of the uh, best releases of releasing your stress is basically talking to somebody about it, sharing your issues or sharing what you're going through. But coming back to the defense services. So basically, an armed forces personnel has to go through so many hardships in their entire service, right? But they are
Mhm.
seldom, expected to talk about those hardships with anybody. They cannot talk to their family because they have to be confidential. They cannot talk to their friends. They cannot talk to somebody who they are close to, right? So it takes a toll on them. And knowingly or unknowingly, they have to uh, live most of their lives keeping certain things to themselves. So how do you think this affects them in the long run?
It would affect obviously very, very negatively with their bodies also, with their mental health also. And like I said, it affects their relationships. It affects how well they feel. And a lot of times people are able to compartmentalize their stressors and their stressful situations, but a lot of people are unable to do that. So these stressful situations tend to spill over in their everyday life, everyday functioning as well. And overall, it does show in their relationships with their family, their partners, their friends. How much time are they able to give? How much attention are they able to give to their significant others or the extended family? How much can they participate in a lot of family functions and weddings and childbirth and all those things? Because these are things which happen in everybody's lives. There's a natural course of action for somebody who's not in the defense services also. And those people sort of are able to attend functions and they are able to do it more often than somebody who's in the defense because of course, their duty towards the nation. So, of course, I'm not saying that it's all black and white and they never get to do it. But as compared to people who live with their families, who live with their extended circles, friends, family friends in the same city, a person in the army or the air force or the navy, they have to keep on moving. And because of that, they have to leave behind the important relationships. So the stresses could show in these ways as well that, their relationships are affected. Their work is also affected, because your concentration goes down, your ability to focus goes down because you're irritable. That could come out at workplace as well because you're sleep deprived. It could affect your work. So, of course, this is how it shows.
I think that's something great because if I talk about myself personally, right? Even if I have to miss one family function or a wedding that I cannot be a part of, you know, it gets me all frustrated and irritated. And
It does. It does.
somebody who is going through all of this on a daily basis, it's really hard for them, right? And it happened with the case also that I studied. So he mentioned that he's always under stress and pressure because of the work environment that they have to be in every single day. But during their training phase, it's like they break you and they make you, So they sort of learn to live
Mhm.
with it, right? But that
Mhm.
line between stress and being too much stressed is very, very thin, because you have
It
your
is.
right, because your sleep cycle is disturbed. You're already too much exhausted when you come home from work. You don't have the energy or the effort to do any other
Mhm.
things, right? So I like, when do you think help should be asked? Because for an armed forces personnel, it is very, very difficult to draw the line between stress and being too much stressed.
That's right. I think that's beautifully put by you. There's one thing though I'd like to mention because it's a standardized process, the training part and the whole workmanship as with the defense forces is a standardized process, most of it. So a lot of times, because you're working with such a big number of people, it cannot be curated to the personality of an individual. It is difficult for an organization to be catering to so many different personalities. This is where I'd like to mention that everybody is different. Their life experiences are different. Their capability of tolerating stress and handling stress and moving ahead of it, their hardiness and their resilience, everything is different. So one thing which can really perturb one individual could be very easily be sailed through by somebody else. So as an organization, it generally gets very difficult to cater to these issues, from a personal standpoint. So individually, people have to be very, very careful of their own, internal systems and be very in tune with what's happening within them. Usually, if somebody is extremely busy, they don't even have enough time to introspect and self-reflect that what's happening until and unless they have to land up in a hospital. uh, Either it's because of the lack of sleep or exhaustion or burnout, and which is a very later stage. So this can be curbed much before, wherein there are little things that somebody needs to watch out for if they need help. So one thing is that you generally feel a lot of departure in who you are as a person and what you feel at the moment. And you feel that a lot has changed, not in a good way. And emotionally, you are unable to cope with a lot of pressures or stressors in your environment, both personal and professional. That is when you should look out for help. Again, your mood really varies. If you are constantly up and down, some days you're feeling very happy, some days you're feeling sad, or there's a constant sadness, or there's a constant level of, say, anxiety that's been building up, which you're unable to release anywhere. So it should basically you should look at the departure from who I was and what am I now. Difference. The difference needs to be taken care of. Your sleep is being affected too much, not because you're at work for a long period, but even when you want to sleep, you're unable to sleep, or you're sleeping just too much. You're constantly sleepy. Then probably things that used to interest you a lot, you used to have fun doing, you don't find interest in them anymore. Again, it's not time related, but general interest that you don't find them interesting. There's lack of focus, loss of concentration. There's intense irritability. You're lashing out on people around you, and you always feel aggravated and anxious. So these are some really telltale signs of somebody whose stress is through the roof. And eating habits really change. Either you're binging too much or your appetite has gone for a six. And generally, you don't feel super hopeful about future. So these are some little things that need to be, asked to yourself that am I feeling any of this? And then, help should be taken.
Right. So help can be taken when it comes to yourself, right? When you're going through all these things, or when you know, okay, this is too much for me to take in now. I need help. I need to fix this. Like you mentioned, there are internal systems that we need to be aligned with, right? But there's another point here. So if you have to take the responsibility of yourself, just and just yourself, you can just go ahead. First of all, a person in the armed forces cannot be thought of having just an individual identity. They're a part of a collective identity, right? And being a
Mhm.
part of that collective identity, you have certain people working under you. You have to look after your men. And sometimes when you yourself are capable enough to help yourself, or just to learn to live with the everyday stress that you go through. So when something happens to your men, right? So you sort of go into a feeling of self blame or self guilt, right? Okay, maybe
Mhm.
I let this happen, or maybe I could have taken care, right? So how to
Mhm.
keep that in check, and how to deal with that phase of life where you have to take care of your men, and if God forbid something happens to them, you take all the blame on yourself.
Now, that is something which is like a departure from any other profession in general, because of course there are leaders in different organizations, but in defense forces, the likability of risk is much high. The harm is much high. And when you get into a position of authority, when you get into a position of leadership, basically, it's important to keep reminding yourself that there's only so much that you can do. You're an individual, others are individuals. And if somebody decides personally, on a personal level, if somebody decides to spend their life in a certain way, like how you can't be held accountable for that. Similarly, if in a tough spot wherein, there are army related operations, or there are things that they have to do in difficult situations, you know what I mean. So, um, if you are leading that, if your men are going there, and it can come with a great sense of guilt if something bad happens. And again, seeking help is one of the best things that you can do to yourself at that moment, because a lot of times the trauma related to the situation could be so much that it's difficult for somebody to handle it on their own. And what people generally do is they block it out. They try to avoid thinking about it, and whatever, they might find their escapes in their own. But it does surface. This can move to your unconscious, but time and again, it'll come, it'll bite you. If you're somebody who's really moved, or if you're somebody who's really high on empathy, these things could bother you in the long term. So it's important to talk it out, even if it's just with your family, your friends, some without giving out any necessary details which are sensitive. Talking about your feelings generally, not about the specifics. It's very important. And if you feel that it's something that you're unable to sort of work with family, with friends, somebody who's not qualified, then speak to a psychologist. And I personally believe that psychologists should be a part of the organization for the long term, for a recurring term, because this is one organization that needs counseling regularly, because it's a very, very difficult line of work. So, because an army person, a personnel who is serving their country, it is only necessary for the nation to give them this much, that they're able to find a non-judgmental safe space where they can talk about how they are feeling without having to feel lesser than however much the academy prepared them for. So I think this is the right course of action.
Yeah, talking about this right course of action, as you know as people who are into the mental health profession. But mental health being a taboo in our country and in the minds of people who are qualified enough, or even the leaders, the authorities, whosoever it may be, like even in our own families, to be very honest, asking for help, going to a mental health professional, is considered as a weakness, as a weak point. Okay, you're not capable enough. Okay, you can't do this. You're mad. You're crazy. It's always looked down upon when it comes to asking for help. So even if it is for a normal person, even if it is for a civilian, let alone an armed forces personnel.
Mhm,
So it is considered as a sign of weakness. So what should be done in
mhm.
that case, where asking for help maybe is considered, that one is weak and it is looked down upon.
Oh, please distance yourself from people who think like that and talk like that. That's the first thing. And if you have that perception, just try it once. And you will know that it's not something which is related to weakness at all. And I will tell you, there have been so many reluctant people brought into my office so many times, especially adults, because they've grown up with an idea that ghar ki baat ghar mein chahiye, and things like that, that you can talk to me. Why do you need a professional to speak with? There's nothing wrong with you. And the representation of mental health in popular media has been so negative throughout the years that everybody thinks that they have to be, conventionally crazy if without offending, I want to use that word, that how they present population who is struggling with mental health issues is so bizarre, it's so strange that nobody wants to be associated with that. So stop telling yourself that this is something that weak people go to, and also inform yourself, educate yourself about mental health statistics. You'll know that how much people are taking help, how many psychologists, counselors are available for you. You'll hear people share their experiences, their testimonials, people who on the outside look absolutely perfect. And there are so many sports people who came up and spoke about, their struggles with depression. There's so many celebrities who spoke about that. So these things should be explored more, and I think it should be a person's responsibility to educate themselves more and people around them as well.
Right, that's absolutely correct. So this definitely should be a part of starting from the school curriculums to, psychologists being everywhere, they should be given a chance to
Absolutely.
dive in for every profession that exists, But it's not as easy as we make it, right? Because psychologists definitely are there, when the armed forces personnel are selected before they have to, go for their academy phase and everything. But after that, if you go to a psychologist, you always have that taboo of getting a category. I'm sure you're aware of
Hmm.
that. And so
Yeah.
many armed forces personnel do not want the tag of, being a category officer just because they're,
Yeah.
seeking help for their mental health issues. So how do we
Yeah.
go about that? How do we, let the psychologists be a part of that whole circle and spread awareness? Okay, this is not something that cannot be treated, and this is not something that you can be, put into a category for.
See, obviously, the tag category is there for a reason, because you're a responsibility of so many men under you, and you are supposed to take care of them. I mean, huge, weight on your shoulders when it comes to this particular organization, and there's so much that's riding on one person individually as well. So, of course, serious mental health conditions should never be considered as something which should be, assimilated in the defense forces. A departure from that would be everyday stressors, general anxiety, general mental health issues, which do not really impact your output if they are taken care of at an earlier stage. So, prevention, like I said, should be what should be looked at, that if they already have somebody to talk to, they can get it off their chest, which will not compound into something which will have to blast one day, or something which will lead to a major problem. So I personally believe that why it should be a commonplace, psychologists are commonplace in defense, so that nobody goes to a point of becoming a category, so to say, and I think that would include only major mental health concerns, which can really impact somebody's quality of output. So, people generally educating themselves on what mental health concerns are and what they should be, we'll be able to work around this.
I am actually very, very glad to know about that, and also, your perspective on that particular point. So there's this last question that I would like to ask you. So this is everything, for being in the armed forces. Now let's come out of the armed forces. Say you're retired, all right? You have to gel back to the civilian life, which in itself is a deal, right? Because you
Hmm.
don't feel socially inclusive. There might be
Yeah.
relationship problems, there might be family issues, right? So what according to you should be done, to uh, deal with this and make the process of transitioning back into the civilian life a little smoother?
We have seen patients, we've come across patients who took it rather poorly, getting assimilated back in the civil society because you live your life a certain way. And for majority, major chunk of your adulthood is going there. And when you're getting older, obviously, you're not as agile, you're not as accommodating at that point. You've already built those ideas and rituals and habits for yourself. The best thing that can be done here is to maintain the relationships that you had before joining the defense forces. You maintain those relationships with your family. It's much easier now because of the technology. So you can constantly stay connected with people back at home, your friends from college, school, stay in touch. Keep calling people over, keep visiting people over, stay in touch with civil life by, exposing yourself to that as well. Whenever you feel that, all right, this army life is getting too comfortable for me, I should just go and see how a normal civil life would be. So probably taking time out, venturing out would be nice. Not just sticking to army related events, army related social events, go to other social events as well if the time and Chutti permits, keeping all that in consideration. And of course, time and again, keep telling yourself that I have to go back to this life. It is going to be different. It is going to be difficult. Having this idea that it will be difficult because it's a change is a game changer because we feel that it should happen organically, it should happen normally, everybody
Right.
should welcome me with open arms. That will not happen. So understanding how difficult it's going to be is the first step, acknowledging it, accepting it, and then making an extra effort. You have to understand that you will have to make an extra effort to get assimilated, and you should be ready to make that effort. So I think that's just a mental barrier that people have to overcome.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And when this goes up on YouTube, the viewers, so many people are going to get a hang basically of the life of an armed forces personnel, and also somebody who's into the defense forces, they'll be able to take a little help and view things from a psychologist's perspective. Okay, all right, this needs to be done, or this is something that I've been through. Because you as a psychologist, uh, even if you are not in the forces but working with the forces, I think you're absolutely aware of what all armed forces personnel go through, because sometimes they also have a doubt. Okay, nobody can understand me in the civilian life, but when somebody
Hmm.
comes to a psychologist, you're like, okay, all right, they hear me, I feel heard, right? And that's where
Absolutely.
you start getting healed in the first place. So thank you so much, Gargi ma'am. It's been an honor, a pleasure to have you on board with us today. And the
Thank you so
session
much.
was so insightful. I could relate with everything that you said, right? And it aligned with the case that I studied. So thank you so much,
Hmm.
ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely talking to you, and I hope people do understand where an army personnel is coming from. People are able to relate to whatever I spoke today. So thank you so much. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.